I'm a man. Yeah, I'm a man. And I'd say I'm pretty gentle, which makes me a gentleman. But where am I? Am I in America? No, that's not right. I'm in Paris, France. Mm-mm. That's not either. Where am I? Russia. I'm in Russia, but where in Russia? Mm. I think I'm in St. Petersburg. Mm-mm, that's no. No, it's Moscow. I'm a gentleman, and I'm in Moscow. That that makes me a gentleman in Moscow. A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles is my new favorite book, just ahead of This Tender Land. When I read this book, it didn't really feel like reading, but rather it felt like I was experiencing it. I was experiencing this amazing story. And I'm pretty much obsessed with this book, and it's an easy 5 stars for me. And in this video, I will tell you why. My name is Nathan Peel. I'm the author of The Cards That Are Dealt. It's about how a high school student uses a secret gambling club in his school in attempt to try to save his grandmother from lung cancer. It's out on Amazon right now. You can check it out, link in the description. While I do love stories and I love making these reviews, they do take a lot of effort and time. So if you could hit that subscribe button, you'd be almost as cool as Paul Rudd. I mean, almost as cool as Paul Rudd. Not as cool because, I mean, come on, it's Paul Rudd. But if you do subscribe, I promise it'll be worth that little tap or click. On to the A Gentleman in Moscow book review. At the start of the novel, Count Alexander Rostov is placed under house arrest by the Bolsheviks for writing a revolutionary poem while he was in college. The Bolsheviks spare his life because he was an aristocrat, and because of this, he has a lot of friends in high places, so they don't want to interfere with that. So instead of killing him, they let him live in a hotel. The story takes place right at the end or after the Bolshevik Revolution and at the beginning of the Soviet Union. The Count is forced to stay in Hotel Metropol in Moscow, which eventually leads him to have the life of a little girl in his hands. And before you assume that this story is boring, let me tell you why it's not. So, the first thing I want to talk about are the historical aspects. If you really like being immersed in another world, immersed in a distant time, this book is the book for you because the author's writing is extremely descriptive but lets you do some of the imaginative thinking as well. So it's really great for that aspect. It talks about a lot of these changes that are taking place in Moscow and in Russia as a whole. You know, they're transitioning from an empire to a communist regime or a republic, as they say. So it's really interesting to see these changes from the Count's perspective. And the way the author talks about communism isn't the way that a lot of other books talk about communism. It's not extreme things. It's not a dystopian world where everything is terrible. The Count looks at these little things and you can see these changes taking place. One of my favorite examples in the book is when the bishop, who's like the main guy, the main manager at the hotel, essentially, he takes all the labels off the wine in this hotel. And there's a lot of very expensive wine. They have a huge selection. And he takes all the labels off so that the only types of wine there is, or the only types of wine there are white wine and red wine. So while the expensive wine is still there, you don't know which one's which because he says it's not fair for, you know, one person to have a better wine than someone else, and therefore the communism aspect of it. And while the Count obviously has his opinions of this, the author lets you have your own opinions of it, and I really like that. And on the note of communism, this book isn't about communism. It's just something that's going on during the time, which I really like. It doesn't obsess over it, but it is a major part of the changes that are happening in Russia. So I think that was really interesting. Next, let me tell you about the characters. The characters in this book are amazing. I love them so much because they feel like real people, and I know people say that all the time about characters, but let me explain why they feel like real people. It's because they don't fixate on certain things, and they feel dynamic and free to express themselves as a real person, if that makes sense. The count has all these different ideas he thinks about from day to day, just like a real person. You know, one day you might be thinking about the changes in food in the food industry. The next day you might be thinking about what you can do to be healthier. You know, you don't think about the same thing day to day, and that's kind of the things going on with these characters. Another thing I want to address in terms of the characters are the female characters, or the women in this book. I heard someone say that this book has no strong women and they're only characterized by their looks or the way they dress, stuff like that, and I completely disagree. All the characters' physical aspects are described. So it's not just the women, it's just the author being descriptive. And also, there are very great female characters in this book. They are amazing, and there's honestly a lot of great female characters, a lot of very strong women in this book, and they really pushed the book forward more than a lot of the other characters. And I don't think the author was trying to do this or that. I think he was writing a good book. I don't think he made the male characters or the female characters stronger. I don't think there's any of that in this book. I think they're all great. But I just wanted to address that because that's something I heard. I'm only going to briefly talk about the writing in this book because it's a known thing or known aspect about Amor Towles' writing is that it's good. It's great writing. It's beautiful. It's intelligent. It's thought-provoking. It's exquisite. It's amazing. You know, I really like the writing, but there's not really much for me to comment on it. It's good. It's not wordy, but at the same time, it feels like word candy. Like it's just nice to read it. So that's all I'm going to say about the writing. I think it speaks for itself, really. Next, I'm going to talk about the themes in this book, and I think this is one of the things where people may disagree the most on, maybe, is that there's a lot of like different ideas in this book, and there's no central idea. Towles himself said that he doesn't want any central idea or central theme. It's just like he describes it as a mosaic of different ideas, which is very true to real life. You don't think about one central thing, you think about a bunch of different things. And I have no problems with books that have a central theme. I just think it's really cool that this was something that was intended in the writing. It talks about like parenting and friendship and belonging somewhere or being homesick, and it also talks about bigger things as well, such as like obviously the communism aspects, materialism, stuff like that as well, which is really interesting. And I love the way that it's kind of talked about in an almost comedic way. It's not like serious, it's just things the character and the other characters too. A lot of times the other characters help in this conversation about serious things, but it's in a easy, light way. And back to the characters, I guess, is the characters are having a conversation with the Count, but you're also kind of having a conversation too, because it's not like these themes are shoved down your throat. It's just like they are talked about, and then you can kind of think about them yourself. I really like that in this book. It's open, but stern, I guess you could say, if that makes sense. Like the Count has his ideas, and then you're free to have yours, which is amazing. Lastly, I'm going to talk about whether or not this book is boring. Is A Gentleman in Moscow a boring book? Well, clearly I don't think so, because I gave it a 5-star. I'm giving it a 5-star review. The reason why I don't think it's boring is because it's like, this book, it feels like a relationship to me. When I first met this book, I wasn't sure if my time would be wasted, if it was worth pursuing, until I got to know it more. I got more into the style, the different conversations. I got used to it more. And with that, I was more emotionally invested, more attached, and eventually it got to a point where I bought the ebook, you know, after buying the paperback, and so that I could read the book more because I was so attached to it. I don't think it's boring. The reason people think it's boring is because of these anecdotes, sorry. And the like the themes the count talks about, the different ideas. They think it's boring because there's not enough action, too much thinking, maybe, but I think that's great. It really shows you who the count is. It really shows you why he is where he is, why he does what he does, and everything else kind of ties together and makes perfect sense. I really like it. And you can also learn things from this book in your own life. I really like the way he talks about time. It's amazing. So I don't think it's boring. If you don't really like historical fiction, this book probably won't be for you at all. If you don't like being immersed in like this other world that actually existed, you more like just like action, maybe fighting, stuff like that. Not really. That's not really what this book is. It's um, like I said, immersed in another world, thinking about these complex ideas in a in a comedic way that gets the point across, and the plot is good. It isn't slow really. There's a lot that happens surprisingly, even though I'd say 90 to 95% of this book takes place in the hotel. So there's a lot that happens, and I was never really bored of this book because the writing's so great, and I loved it. Overall, I think you should give this book a try, especially if you like historical fiction. A Gentleman in Moscow by Amor Towles is my new favorite piece of historical fiction and my new favorite book overall. So check it out, give it a try, and see how you like it. If you watched all the way to this point in the video, you are a very awesome and respectable human being. I hope you enjoyed, and it would be really great if you could subscribe and leave a like. It helps out, and again, you won't regret it. Check out my book, The Cards That Are Dealt, right there. The link will be in the description. It's on Amazon, paperback, and an ebook. And be sure to stay tuned for the next video, and I hope you have a fantastic day.